Welcome back to our program. Separation of church and state is a basic principle of American government. For years, Americans have disagreed over how that separation should actually work. In November, Florida voters will be voting on a proposed constitutional amendment that would allow state money to go to religious organizations. Proponents say that would allow parents to use school vouchers at church schools, and they say that is freedom of choice. But opponents argue that would jeopardize basic freedom of religion by favoring some religious groups over others. Joining me now to talk about this is Mark LaFontaine of American Veterans for Equality. He's a tax accountant and local activist who opposes state funding for religious groups. Welcome to the show, Mark. Did I pronounce your name right?
You did, Mark LaFontaine.
Okay, Mark. Yes. Great to have you here. Why are you so opposed to this constitutional amendment?
Well, I believe in our basic tenet of separation of church and state. You know, our state constitution also has the provision where funding, public money should not be given to private organizations for religious proselytizing or religious purposes. Okay, well, somebody here who before this would argue that this is not proselytizing, this is giving parents the choice. I know, I'm sure you know that former Governor Jeb Bush was the number one proponent of this, where people could take their money, the money that's being used at schools that are failing, and they could have a choice to put their children in whatever schools they choose. So for them, it's a matter of choice, not a matter of proselytizing. Right, but the reality is most organizations that are out there that have given and utilized their programs and have provided services for the benefit of the general population, when it is a religious organization, they have in fact refused services to specific sectors of the community, be it either African American or Latino or GLBT. There are aspects and segments of our community that are overlooked and underserved, and those people might be afraid to come forward to receive services from these organizations as well. But wouldn't you agree that there are many, church groups that are doing an outstanding job of helping homeless people, of helping, battered women, of helping people who have drug problems? And those organizations may need some help, and if the state can help, why not? Why not let the state help? There are organizations that provide good services out there for the general populace, but, the reality is that we in the state of Florida are in a crisis right now. That's true. We have a budget crisis going on in Tallahassee that is not being adequately taken care of. We have property tax issues. We have insurance issues that are affecting everyday citizens that are coming in into my practice anyway, to be taken care of. That is a unified issue for Floridians. What I view this particular amendment to be doing is actually putting in a wedge issue to more or less garner support from the right-wing conservatives to come out and vote on the November ballot. Let's explain how this ended up on the ballot. It's the special commission that's formed every 20 years. Explain that to me. The Budget and Taxation Committee got together, and one of their members promoted this constitutional proposal. And they basically had a vote of 17-7 on, I believe it was Wednesday, approving that it be placed onto the November ballot. And basically what it's doing is it's allowing for public monies to be granted to religious institutions for public service. Well, let's say, for example, that a student has a Bright Futures scholarship, right, and a good student, and may go to a school like Barry University or St. Thomas, which are Catholic universities. You would be against them being able to use scholarship money to go to those schools, even though it would alleviate the overcrowding at our state schools? The problem that I find with this amendment, though, again, goes back to the point that we haven't fixed our educational system in the state at all at this point in time. We keep having budget cuts that are coming up constantly year in and year out. We need to fix the basic programs that are out there before we can start looking at pulling funding from our public education system and causing it to become further and further imperiled, rather than taking that money and giving it to these private organizations. Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier that you see this as a wedge issue that's going to draw people to the polls. A lot of people would agree with that. But do you also see it as a roundabout way of getting school vouchers approved, which, again, Governor Bush
was so strong on?
And that is another key aspect that is out there. The voucher system was thrown out, I believe, by the appellate courts as being unconstitutional. So here again, it is a roundabout way to circumvent. But I think ultimately we're going to have to look at these other organizations like the Anti-Defamation League, the ACLU is coming forward, if it does pass, and having it go through the court system. And then again, here again, we are looking at a waste of taxpayer money.
So eventually you think this will all be decided by the courts if indeed it is passed as a constitutional amendment?
It's a possibility.
And it would need 60% of the vote, correct?
Yes, it would.
Okay. All right, Mark, thank you very much for joining us.